You know, the Bible declares in Proverbs, I believe it is, somewhere around Proverbs 5:7, it states that wisdom being the principal thing, get wisdom. But with all thy getting, get an understanding. And then again, there's another place in that same work of literature that describes people being led into captivity for lack of knowledge. And yet another place says, but you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Let's get free. You know, there is a gentleman by the name of Neely Fuller. He wrote a book in 1984. It's called The Independent Compensatory Code System. And in that book, he states that if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, everything else that you know is only going to confuse you. So, let's go and get an understanding of exactly what it is that we are dealing with. We are dealing with a system. That's the first thing. We're dealing with a system that is specifically designed to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth. It's rooted in the knowledge that the white skin condition is actually a recessive genetic trait, meaning that if a white person and a black person copulate, the fruit of that womb is going to be a person of color. Mind you, when Europe declares the Dark Ages, it wasn't a dark period for black folks. It wasn't a dark period for Africa. That was the height of civilization, great dynasties and so forth. But for that person, it was not so. And there's a history there. There's a history there. But back to, and I'm going to float that balloon because I'm going to come back to that history. Because we need to know. You need to understand what you're dealing with and why. So I'm going to float that balloon about the whys. And we're going to go back to the system and describe more in detail what it is, because it impacts every area of people activity. We're talking economics, education, religion, law, politics, war, sex, and certainly religion. It impacts every area of people activity. So now, keeping that in mind, now go back to the information that I gave you about the black laws, the black exclusion laws. Now go back to the Oregon State Constitution, Oregon being the only state that was designed and clearly stated, no black folks here. There's a reason. There's a reason, and we have to understand the reason, or we're going to be just on a hamster wheel, repeating and repeating, saying, okay, well, if you change policing, it'll be okay. If you do this, it'll be, no, it won't be okay. And you need to understand why, so that we can understand the exact direction that we should be moving in simultaneously. So, the system, and I use it interchangeably, racism, white privilege, white supremacy, they're used interchangeably in place of one another. The system comes complete with signs, hidden language, and again, as Neely Fuller indicated in that book in 1984, if you don't understand what you're dealing with, everything else is only going to confuse you, especially if you're depending on a particular religion or some invisible thing to descend from the skies and grant assistance, and you're trying to figure out why you've been the best Christian, the best Muslim, the best whatever you can possibly be, and your situation is not changing. It's because you don't have the right information. And we've come into agreement with things that have begun to act as laws in our lives, and they're false images. And I'll just keep it real because there's no more time. I don't know how much I can get to today, but I definitely want to get through this. So let's go back. And I said we were going to float a balloon. And that balloon is, how did this intense, emotional loathing begin? Why is the black man so hated, so ostracized, and yet so loved at the same time? Scientists have now agreed, and most people readily accept and will agree, that life began in Africa and that all persons of the earth are descended from Africans, and that's true. And somewhere locked deep inside of the mind of the European is a distant memory, a memory of a distant past that is very painful, because there was a time when we lived in close proximity to one another, but that ended with an expulsion. And it wasn't necessarily due to the lack of melanin, but the behavior of those persons that were, for lack of a better term, inflicted with a condition that was not the norm. Though, I must say, Africans and African Americans have had a tendency to be really receptive and supportive and caring of one another. And that characteristic, well, up into the 1980s, it remained. There's another balloon. Let's float axiology. And I'm going to come back to that balloon. We're going to finish this train of thought. There was a time when black and white coexisted. It wasn't the full-blown species that it is today. And I'll come back at another time and give a more accurate, detailed explanation of what that process looked like and what all that involved. But I want to keep this just straight into the point for now. So we've gone over, if you don't understand racism, everything else that you know is only going to confuse you. Then we talked about what is racism. The system designed by persons who classify themselves as white or non-black. The system designed to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth as a result of becoming aware after their dark ages that the majority of the Earth is occupied by persons of color. And having seen through commingling with the other populations, the result of that commingling always comes out to be a person of color. So the question undoubtedly was asked, how do we remain on this earth? The answer, let's develop a system that's going to ensure that we do, in light of the fact that everyone else is melanated. We feel some kind of way about that, and somewhere deep in us is the memory that, wait a minute, that was our mother too. How did we end up encapsulated in ice and they still there? Why are they loved and we not? Here now, think. You have stories in what is called the Bible of two brothers. The one was going to be subservient to the other. Or Cain and Abel. Abel slew one. I hear your brother's blood. What's going on? What's going on? What is the origin of the conflict in brotherhood that is described through the metaphors and allegories of the Bible? Oh, brother, think. All life came from us, including that life. If you think to yourself, what kind of mental anguish and pain does a person incur as a result of their mother and their father sending them away? But then again, it wasn't just because of the recessive genetic trait of the skin. It was not that. It was the behavior. It was the mindset. So, again, that's that. Now, I told you, we were going to float another balloon, and I titled that balloon that's floating Axiology. What is axiology? Axiology is the study of how groups of people arrive at their primary value system. The science looks at environment, it looks at available resources, and other information that's available for study. For example, on the continent of Africa, as the world is quite aware, there is a plethora of resources. In the ground, above the ground, in the water, in the sky, there's plenty. The climate, there was no freezing going on. You could be naked, excuse me, and be perfectly fine. So that's going to facilitate the development of a mind that is not rooted in lack and is not selfish. So you'll get stories or it takes a village to raise a child. You'll get the 42 negative confessions. I have not committed this. I have not looked at that. I have not. That's the kind of mindset that you're going to get. You're going to get a creative population that can contribute high-level societies that can give the world a humanity. That's what you're going to get from that. You're going to get a societal well-being. That's the primary value system. Relationship between the Creator and me, and between my brother and my sister and me and us and the earth. Relationships, the interdependency of relationships, of systems, and how it benefits the whole. We are all one. On the other hand, you're going to have a different climate. Imagine, listen to what you're hearing. You're going to have an ice age, which is going to limit resources, and that's going to promote scarcity, which is going to challenge the mind and the person's ability to share, because now you're developing an adversarial sort of situation. That whole mental concept of caveman and whatnot, well, that was never our reality. And I'll give you another piece of information in upcoming videos to let you know where you came from. You were never a caveman, black woman. That was never you. There's no history of it. There's no record of it anywhere. That was not your lot. But I will tell you where you came from. Can't do it now. Don't want to put too much on you. But going back to this development of a mindset and how the European developed its primary value system and what that is. The primary value system of the European is the acquisition of things. How to own things. And it's rooted in fear and it's rooted in lack. You're coming up into a climate that's full of ice. There's not a lot of vegetation growing, not a lot of animals, because you're limited in your human physicality and characteristics against animals, and you have to develop the technology to make slaying and all of that possible. So you're really looking at a mind that is being formed in a cold climate where there's slack, there's scarcity of resources, and that's becoming more, I don't want to say animal-like, but more adversarial to one another. Because even if a person wants to reproduce for pleasure or for purpose, that's one thing. But to share the little that I have and fear that where am I going to replace it? So yeah, I'll lay with you and we can do that, we can smash, but I'm going to need you to leave immediately after that, because I really, it's all about, I done got mine, now you get yours. Now you go get yours and come back, we might be able to do something, but yeah. So you can see there's a different mindset developing in that group now that they have left home. So there's that piece. So now, let's come back to the present and better understand the nature of the conflict. Already we see that it's threefold. It has to do with a genetically recessive trait. It has to do with how that mindset was developed once it was driven from home. And then 3, the knowledge somewhere, we understand that we have been rejected and we're pissed off about it. So, when the European comes back home and sees mother and sees father and gets invited to dinner, being in that situation undoubtedly dislodged antiquity, and the resentment came and caused the host to be captured, the wife to be molested. The son came home and molested its mother, castrated its father. If you look at crimes that are committed, a person or an inspector, an investigator can tell pretty much whether or not a crime was committed by someone who was intimately involved with this person's life, based on how violent the wounds are. It's not normal to stab a person 500 times. That's passionate. That's above and beyond what's necessary to minimize the threat. But now when you go back and look at the history of dealings between this African man, this original man, and this European man that has become what it is now, and you see the deep hatred and animosity. Who ties a man's arms and legs to 4 horses and pulls him apart in front of his family? Who does that? Who is so involved in hatred that they hang us by trees and cut off our genitalia and keep them as souvenirs? There's something wrong with that. Which brings me to the next point. We're dealing with a psychopath. Look it up for yourself. But now you know a bit more about how that mind got so broken that it became psychopathic. There are 20 characteristics that you can look at to determine whether a person is a psychopath. And it's a very, it's not difficult to do. You can just, there's a test. I don't want to stop here and go looking for that because it's going to make the video slow down, and I don't want to do that. But we're dealing with a psychopathic behavior. And unless a person is willing to accept, 1, there is a problem, 2, seek treatment for the problem, 3, get treatment and begin the rehabilitative process, then it is a futile for you and I to either try to convince them to treat us correctly. I mean, look at it. This is the whole gist of the societal responsibility to repair the damage that has been done, to make an amends for the damage that has been done through reparations, because of the culture of continuity, generation after generation after generation. That's what makes it a debt that society owes. So, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to inbox me. You can find me, Leon McCoy, on Facebook. And if you follow wherever this is posted at, you can just respond to that, because I'll use Twitter, I'll use Tumblr, I'll use my LinkedIn, I'll use Facebook Messenger. I try to use all sorts of platforms because right now I'm really concerned with getting information out to the people. Because, for one, we are stronger together. When we can see the commonality of one another through pain, to be able to dialogue with a person about why they feel the way they feel, or why they don't, how to better have a meeting of the minds. It's always so valuable to me, because I realize that we've been lied to. I was lied to my entire life, through religion, through school, indoctrination, and undoubtedly it happened to the majority of people, because the system was not designed to be understood by persons it was impacting. It's manipulation. And without understanding that, just like Neely Fuller said, everything else that you know will only confuse you. So let's do a recap. Unless you understand white supremacy, white privilege, racism, what it is, how it operates, how it impacts you and the world within which we all live, everything else that you know will only confuse you. And so we have to understand, too, what is it? It's a system. Racism, white privilege, white supremacy, it's a system that is designed by persons who classify themselves as white based on a recessively genetic trait, albinoism. The system is designed to ensure the survival of this group as a whole on the planet Earth. There you have it. And the system that was designed operates, and this is very important, it operates in every area of people activity. That's education, it's economics, it's war, it's law, it's politics, it's religion, it's sex. Everywhere that people interact, you will find the system alive and working. And now, if you begin to look, symbolism is everywhere. Now, I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear me. Christian, go back now to your book and read it. Read it with this understanding, and know that you have been had. My Muslim brothers, go back to your Quran and read. Like the Prophet said, read. And don't just read that book. Get up, get to a library, and find the truth. Because it's the truth that's going to make you free. The lie has divided a house. And a divided house cannot stand. We cannot stand this person being Christian, this person being Muslim, this person being Judaism, this person being Zoroaster. It won't work. What we must do is recalibrate ourselves to one another based on the truth. African spirituality that is at the root of every civilization that came into being, and is the reason for their continued survival, and is the reason that this person, this group of people are fighting so hard against you. They know who you are. You just don't know. So now I'm telling you, understand what you're in. Understand that what you are really in is a sun cult. But don't take my word for it. Read it for yourself. But I do know this. The hour is far spent, and we don't have much time. The fullness of time is now, and I need you to be on your post. Because this shot is not going to come again. If we are going to be victorious in this endeavor, I'm going to need you to get your mind right. And that means letting go of a European conceived reality. Take possession of your divine self, brother, sister. We need you. Peace and blessings.